Welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
Here we are.
Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy. We took a week off.
We did.
Took a vacation.
Unexpectedly. We didn't think we were going to take a week off, and then we did.
Right. So
I just ran up and down the stairs, so I'm going to let you talk.
That's Ainsley Sevier. I'm Dark Sevier. This is our special guest. Christine Trafford is here for the show. And we just want to do our standard disclaimers before the show. This show is called Post-Orthodoxy. Sometimes we talk about things that are outside the consensus comfort zone. That doesn't necessarily mean we're endorsing those things, but this is where we explore ideas. Some of those may cause people distress. So be forewarned. This show isn't for everybody, in other words. So if you're here, welcome to the show. And friends, frenemies, we have a chat over here. So if you have something to say about what we're saying, please join in the conversation. Just because we talk about the devil doesn't mean we're the devil.
Ooh.
It's the best way to break it down.
And put that on a bumper sticker.
Right.
All right. So we're welcome to the show.
We had another good bumper sticker from the show I just edited with Evno Omni from January 30th. I just put it up on our Podbean for podcast listener people. One of the bumper sticker from that show was my dogma doesn't like your data, so my dogma is going to bite you. But I mean, it's not very refined yet. But like,
I like it though.
Yeah, because the dogma is like anything that can't be questioned, and the whole point of data in any scenario is to continually refine
and answer questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And dogmas think that they already know everything that's going on and never need to be questioned. So
I like it.
All right, I'm gonna make an angry face and start the show.
Anyway, thank you so much to everybody who's tuning in now and or later. We appreciate you guys. You can, like Dark was saying, you can leave a comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. And if you hear something that you like today, take a minute and share the show with your friends.
Yeah, and I'm out of jail. I guess you can see this on my actual Facebook page.
You were able to share it?
Oh. Yeah, they've let me out of Facebook live stream jail. So
momentarily.
Let's see how that goes.
That has become like rampant.
I was framed.
Crazy.
They brought everybody onto these platforms, and now they can just control the narrative however they want.
Who's they?
I know.
They.
I know. It's bad. But leave us a chat and tell us where you're listening from this morning. You can be as vague or as broad as you like, and we'll be happy to hear from you. So, Christine.
Ainsley.
So nice to hear my name. I love that. We've been talking about having you on the show for a while.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting that you were finally here.
I'm really excited to finally be here. It feels like it has been something we've been talking about for like years.
Maybe? Yeah. I think we could say years plural at this point. Yeah. Weird.
Right?
Right, because there was like whenever I met you, and then there was like this blur of the last 2 years that nobody really knows what happened.
I don't remember it.
Yeah. It's like whatever happened after the last Folk Fest is kind of like, meh.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. Well, how would you describe yourself to people?
Well, I am a holistic health professional, basically. I focus on mind-body healing and the mind-body connection in healing. I really kind of started on this healing journey of my own. I think we all enter our, purpose-driven careers based on what
your
what
own
we went
healing.
through. Yeah. And when I was 14, I was in a car accident, and it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
You know, I injured my back and my kidney, and I couldn't walk very well for
Injured a
while.
kidney.
Yeah.
But it's still going.
That's
it. So like you bruised a kidney?
It gives me kidney stones sometimes, which is
because of the trauma.
Yeah, there's a lot of but it does well. You know, we're okay.
Right.
But
you and your kidney.
my kidney. It was more my back, and you know, being like 14, 15 years old and having constant back pain, you know, and then those days where you couldn't, you know, like you see the old people that are maybe our age now, but that like, you know, couldn't,
you know, back then.
Right. They couldn't get out of bed because their back went out, you know, and that would happen to me. And, you know, not lots of help from anybody other than like, well, we could do back surgery, but we don't see anything that's really wrong, so we don't even know what we would do, you know, that kind of a story.
So you're just like, I guess I just have this chronic pain now.
Yeah, I guess this just sucks now, and I end up in the ER every few months for a steroid shot in my back, and you know, long story short.
But that was just physical trauma, Christine.
Right. There was definitely no mental component to that. We're talking about all other traumas, not this one. And that's I'll come around to the interesting mind-body part with that, actually. So I came to use massage and yoga. One of my best friend's moms was a massage therapist, and you know, I started exploring that and really learned how to manage my pain, you know, and
with other people giving you massages,
right? With other people giving me massages, with, you know, doing yoga regularly, with just kind of becoming more body aware in general, and, you know, doing all the things, right, that I needed to do in my individual case to manage that. And so then I, you know, I got a bachelor's degree in health science from Montana Tech, and hemmed and hawed a little bit about exactly where I wanted to take that, but ended up going to massage therapy school in Missoula.
Okay.
While my husband was in college there at the university, and
that works out.
It was great. I loved it. I think it was a really good school, because I talk to a lot of people now that are in massage therapy school, and you know, they don't get half of the mentorship and experience and really like all of the cool little introductions to different things that I did when I was there.
More of a broad spectrum.
Right. Like, here's how you go and work at, you know, the McMassage parlor.
Massage Envy.
Yes, Massage Envy.
I had a Massage Envy subscription.
Nothing
for
against
a while.
those guys.
Totally
I am not saying that they are bad in any way.
Massage.
But you know, it's really just kind of cranking people out to go and work, not necessarily be really, really good.
You're not super invested in like a long care journey,
right? Like really developing your career as an integrative therapist, and you know, so I really learned what was possible, you know, and I started exploring more continuing education. I'm kind of addicted to continuing education, maybe. I've taken a lot of it over the years. And two of the big things I've pursued are hypnotherapy and craniosacral therapy.
Okay.
And
can you, I know, just to zoom out from the summary of your life, can you do a brief moment of what is hypnotherapy and what is craniosacral therapy?
Yeah, let's do a 101 on some of those things.
Totally. Yeah. So hypnotherapy, I think, is probably more widely known. Like, more people have heard the term hypnotherapy than craniosacral therapy, but it's super misunderstood. You know, I think
right, because
right, or like the stage hypnosis guy, like walk like a chicken and whatever.
Yep.
And, like, it's not that.
Right.
Hypnotherapy is really just a way to calm your nervous system, to take you into an altered state of consciousness where you're able to access things that maybe you wouldn't be able to access consciously. You're still completely in control, right? Like, you still can say, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't feel comfortable with that. You know, it's really just accessing things that you aren't aware of on a conscious level. And then, doing something about that, really dialoguing with that subconscious and, making alterations to deeply held beliefs. And, once we identify what they are, once those beliefs that are really affecting your decision making, on a daily basis, really for most of us.
I think that was one of my favorite things. I did the Landmark Forum as one of the first kind of woo-woo things that I did outside of Jesus Church. And it's like a self-help empire of conferences. And one of the things that I think I benefited most from that was anytime anybody would say something, they're like, well, so let me reinterpret that back to you as a belief. You know, this is what that thing you just said is a story you're telling yourself about yourself.
Right. It's not necessarily a truth.
It's not necessarily
just the
exists outside of you.
Yeah.
But the belief system that's based on comes from something that happened to you probably in the first 5 years of your life.
Yes.
That made you believe
your core programming.
When I'm around a man with a beard, I'm not safe.
Right.
That's a belief system that's not true for everybody,
And it may not always be conscious.
It might not even be true
often
for you
not
anymore.
Conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
It's often not conscious. And that's the whole point, right, of hypnotherapy. And then craniosacral therapy is actually, it's pretty big, but it's, again, probably something a lot of people haven't heard of, or if they have, they don't really know what it is, or they think, oh, it has something to do with your head, right?
Cranium.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's
sacrum, booty.
Exactly. Very good. And a lot of people don't know what sacrums are. Very, very nice. And
they've landed on it before. So
yes, that's not a good way to learn, but it's effective, I suppose. So,
ice skating.
but craniosacral therapy, they do a lot of trauma work in that modality, and craniosacral therapy is a form of manual therapy, and it's the craniosacral system is the brain, spinal cord, the connective tissue around those structures, the meninges, right, and then the cerebrospinal fluid that's bathing them, that they should be floating in nice and free flowing all the way around those structures. But like trauma happens,
and then you clench.
Animalistically,
like a pill bug or an armadillo or whatever it is, you have to clench to protect yourself. And we do that even as super evolved animals.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's even just like a physical thing, like a head blow, like the so the Epledger Institute in Florida partners with the NFL because of all of the, head injuries and concussions, multiple concussions that are seen in football. And, that physical, bonk will cause some adherence of those connective tissues to that neural tissue. And then that leads to all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's the brain, there's so much about the brain specifics that we don't fully understand at this point, like the little detailed things of what exactly is causing what.
I'll ask one other hypothetical zoom out question before we get back to the story of your life.
For sure.
And that is, do you feel as though there has been an uptick in conventional medicine and therapy of recognizing the connection between mental traumas and what they do to the body and physical traumas and what they do to the mind?
For sure.
Is it getting better?
It's way getting better. I think actually this whole opioid crisis thing has been wonderful for in the way that it's really pushed that forward. There's actually something called the Pain Management Collaboratory. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct. And you can look that up.
I'm good.
And it's a partnership between the VA, the Department of Defense, and the DPHHS. And basically they're they formed this committee and they're like, here's money. Figure out how we can fix healthcare so that we're actually doing what we all know should be done, using more integrative. Yes, it's great. And
preemptive healthcare doesn't make as much money.
No,
as
not
opioids.
At all. Not at all. So that's why this is kind of a profound thing they're doing, and why I'm a preferred provider for the VA now.
Hey,
super big
great.
deal. Like that I can see all these veterans, and actually get paid by the VA system a good amount of money
to actually help people feel better, not just mask symptoms. I think that's another big problem is that a lot of people think that when they go to the doctor and they're treated, that they're being given help for their issue, but really most of what mainstream Western medicine does is just help you not feel the symptoms of your problems.
Right. It's Band-Aid medicine.
It's crazy.
And it's wonderful for like emergency traumas. Like if I get hit by a truck, I want that. I want them to stop the bleeding and
yes, please.
reset the bones and all that. But then after I'm out of that immediate crisis, it's really not amazing at helping you to heal, or helping you to heal from sickness and things like that. But they are actively trying to do something about that and figure out like how do we fix the system. And so one thing that they've done with that pain management collaboratory is they've instated all of these different initiatives and protocols within the VA and military hospitals and clinics, because they can, they're easily controlled. Like they can say, you guys do this, and it's not, a private industry. And now they're just kind of gathering data on how is it working? Like, how can we change this and how can we do better? So there's stuff, and that has prompted more research, right? Which has prompted better acceptance, because, medical doctors like research. They like a very specific kind of research, and it's very expensive research. And there's not a lot of people to pay for that, whereas with, the pharmaceutical industry, there's lots of money to be given to pay for those kinds of studies that they will then pay attention to, right? To make more money, where I don't make nearly as much money,
right? And you're not making money for someone else,
right?
I can't prescribe you to a Marine that I know and have the government make money off of it, or have a pharmaceutical company make money off of me prescribing you.
Exactly. Which isn't to say that pharmaceuticals are inherently bad. It's just it's kind of set up to be successful in a capitalistic system, whereas therapies aren't so much. Doesn't make them any less valuable.
No.
And so craniosacral therapy,
right?
Just an amazing, very gentle modality. You can look.
Is it like a massage? Are people laying down?
People are laying down.
Yeah.
So you can go to upledger.com, and they've actually got a wonderful overview and a lot of really cool videos just really explaining in depth what craniosacral is. But you are laying down, you are fully clothed, however, and it is very relaxing. Generally what clients say to me, they say, wow, that was different, or they're like, oh, like I feel great, but like they're really kind of out of it for a little bit, and groggy. I've seen some really profound healing from it. I've seen what the focus is of that is when we talk about trauma, is helping to release the physical aspects of trauma, because trauma does become recorded in your body, on your body's tissues, and then affects things because it's there, right? We in craniosacral therapy, they talk about energy cysts.
Energy cysts,
yeah,
and a buildup of something. Meh.
It's like whatever, like kind of foreign traumatic. Like I like to explain it, with the physical aspect, right? So like you get bonked over the head, bonk,
right,
and then like that kinetic energy like travels down through your body, and it'll try to go all the way through and out, but it probably won't make it, So then it'll end up like landing somewhere, and then your body recognizes that as not conducive to its energy. So it'll kind of create an area of increased entropy to wall that off, to protect any more tissue from being affected by it. However, over time, that's not the best strategy. So with craniosacral therapy, you're going in and creating enough safety and safeness, right? And other things. It's a fairly complex modality, but you're really just opening that up to peel those layers back and then let that energy reprocess back up and out.
Is there a mental aspect to that you're recommending? Is there
there's always
the way you think about the pain? I met this kahuna when I was in Hawaii a long time ago, and he said, let's say you're hammering on the porch and you hit your thumb, and you curse first, and then you just keep talking. You just keep replaying that hammer hitting your thumb over and over. Why did I do that?
I hate it.
If I hadn't have, and then you just keep replaying the pain. He goes, if after you get through cursing, you just reimagine missing your thumb, like you didn't do the accident, and replay that over and over, your thumb will heal faster.
It's so funny because I literally read, so I don't know if you guys have probably read the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
I've heard of that, yeah.
I
It's
want
like
to.
the best, you know,
Yeah.
Bessel van der Kolk. He's kind of like the father of somatic psychology. And, but in that book, you will read about, he had a friend who was at Ground Zero and during 9/11, and the son of that friend was at school, I think in like first grade or something, at like the school that was like 1,500 feet from where this was,
geez.
and watched out their window and saw the plane hit and everything.
No.
And so, you know, about a week after everything happened, he came to visit, and I think really was there to kind of talk and help with trauma and trauma survivors, because that's his big specialty, the guy that wrote the book. And the kid had drawn a picture of the towers, you know,
Yeah.
and the one being hit by the plane and people jumping out of the windows and the firemen and everything. And at the bottom, there was like a big black circle. And he's like, what is that? What's that big black circle? And he's like, oh, it's a trampoline. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, yeah, so that next time when it happens, they'll be safe. Right? Doesn't that just make you want to tear up and cry? But like, really, that is because this kid was so well adjusted, you know, and had all the things that he needed right up to that age of 5, right? That's what we're talking about, 5 or 6, when, you know, that he had used his imagination to fix that in his mind so that it didn't keep happening over and over again. When he thought of it the next time, they were safe.
He had such a strong belief that life in general was safe and healthy that rather than seeing the 2 towers collapse and people dying and being like, yep, expected that.
And becoming stuck in that moment of trauma, which is so common. Right. So there's totally a thing to that. And that's really interesting that you bring that up.
Kevin Noel Olson is tuning in. He's been a longtime friend of the show.
Hello,
and
Kevin.
He's talking about the placebo effect is even better than recognized, and it's available to everyone inexpensively. That's kind of what you're talking about, is like self-placeboing.
Well, I haven't hammered 2 thumbs and then replayed the injury and replayed the not injury to do a test on myself. But I started integrating that into every time I bang my head or do, you know, because
Science.
I curse first, and then I just see myself having not done it.
Yeah.
And then I don't. It's almost become a thing where I don't I don't have to replay that for some reason.
Yeah.
Where the way I would replay, like, geez, if I just hadn't have, then I wouldn't be suffering. And then I think that's not a placebo. Is that a placebo?
Well, the
Is?
placebo is when someone else gives you what you believe to be a medication to
And
help
take
you with
it,
a problem.
and it may have the desired effect.
And the placebo effect is when your belief that you've been given the real medication is so strong that you experience the same benefits as the people who were actually given that medication.
So yes, this is the mind-body connection that we're going to talk
Except
about
now you're
today.
doing it to yourself.
Doing it to yourself, self-medicating mentally.
Self-placeboing.
Totally.
And
And I mean,
awesome.
there's so much to that placebo effect. There's actually, since we're talking about books, a couple other really great books are The Relaxation Response and Beyond the Relaxation Response. And those are older also. They were written by a Harvard-educated cardiologist. And
as in, like, what happens to your body when you are actually at rest?
Sort of. Yes, but more than that, right? So the relaxation response was prompted by, being a cardiologist. This was back in like the 70s when it was very well known that the mind and the body were completely separate things, and they did not affect each other.
Right, completely separate.
Completely
separate.
Well, because Jesus put your spirit in you, and that's different than this crust you will leave behind when you die.
It's right. Like it's God, there's so much to the cultural beliefs that we have that like permeate through even like the most scientific things, right?
I think you get to the core of like nature, and we're humans, and that is nature, is like one of the most profound versions of that, where we don't even consider ourselves a part of nature.
And
Sorry
or
to
this,
interrupt
it's
this.
okay. No, it's all right.
No, we've already
This
veered
is
off
just a
several
really
times.
interesting. This is a really interesting part of the mind body. So I don't want to get distracted from it. So the a cardiologist notices more than anybody that like you go into the doctor and your heart rate, your blood pressure, everything goes up, and everybody knew that too. And so he's like, that doesn't make sense. Why, if the mind doesn't affect the body, why would being nervous and going to the doctor affect your heart rate and your blood pressure? So he went back, actually left his clinical practice and went back to Harvard to do research. And this is when he started researching Transcendental Meditation, because that was kind of like the big thing, right, at the time. Like all the kids were doing it. And so he just like would, in traditional university research, you just round up a bunch of college students and give them a break. Transcendental Meditation is pretty simple, right? It's like pick a mantra of any kind, whatever, a word or a sound or anything at all that means something to you. Repeat it to occupy that monkey brain, that critter brain, and then allow for your nervous system to calm down and the rest of your body. So, and then he would like monitor everything, right? Like you'd be sitting there meditating, but you're also like hooked up to all these like, EKGs and wires and stuff, and have like a thermometer up your butt and like measuring like your internal temperature and everything. Yeah, I know, right? And they were like, wow, like literally 2 weeks of this, and these people are changing their blood pressure, they're changing their cholesterol levels, they're changing everything. Like, I mean, like all this stuff, like you can look that up too. But the interesting part, going back to what we were talking about with the placebo effect, so then he wrote a follow-up book called Beyond the Relaxation Response, which, the first book got, like, it was a big deal. People were like, whoa, what do you mean the mind and body are connected? That's crazy.
Heretic.
Yeah.
That would be a post-Orthodox perspective at the time.
Exactly. It was huge. It was
Health
so
heretic.
controversial. But it was also at a time when China and Tibet were like, and the Dalai Lama was like, well, maybe, if we can show the value of what we're doing, to, in Western terms to the Chinese, they'll back off. Spoiler, it didn't work. But but that prompted the Dalai Lama to actually say, because he wanted to go and study like really, really experienced meditators.
Yeah.
Right. And not just college kids that have been doing this for 2 weeks. And, they were like, no way, like we don't do that. But then the Dalai Lama was like, well, you have to. And so they were like, okay, I guess we will. So he went to, climbed up into the mountains of the Himalayas with all of his equipment and everything to find these like hermit monks.
The Dalai Lama did?
No, this is the research. The Dalai Lama just signed a thing and then forgot about it, I'm sure, because he
I
has
see.
so many other things going on. But this researcher that wrote the book, and he climbs up into the mountains and did this same thing, here, put this thermometer up your butt and we'll like hook you up to all these things. Now sit there and meditate. And they did these like really fascinating things. Like they would change, like at will, change their temperature. They could sit out in the snow and with like a loincloth on or whatever and melt the snow and never become cold. And like this was like measurable on here. And so even
they kept
though
their basal body temperature high.
Right. Like, so even though like those are things you can't do, they were doing it because they believed they could.
Yeah.
And really, like, so a lot of that book talks about, what is the placebo effect? What is the power of belief? Is it actually just, faking yourself out? Or is there really more to that? It's really kind of interesting.
I would like to, one of the things that I want to do someday when I have more time is like see if I can, this is just sort of like a pet project that's been living in the back of my head for several years, is see if I can find a way to pass through a wall.
I'm laughing, but yes.
No, I mean, but like
out of all the things.
Out of all
like astral projecting?
No, like walk through this wall.
Like the Flash, like style.
Because like
get some lightning.
Have your atoms.
Atoms are more space than matter. I am more space than matter. There is less physical stuff here than there is space.
Yeah.
And same thing right here. So I should be able to theoretically like me through the wall.
Just you have to use that sound.
If your molecules can vibrate to a level that like is
Works
higher
around
than
it.
that and can go around that, then it is totally possible.
Right? Scientifically,
you gotta
it's
work
possible.
up that speed though. I think that might take a while to run that
I
marathon.
have to work up my belief.
That sound, you need to work on that sound a little bit more and refine it.
Sound effects are everything, as we all know.
So what got you hyper-focused on hypnotherapy and craniosacral as your modalities of choice?
Yeah, there's a lot of modalities out there.
There's a lot, and I've studied a lot, and I really think those two just sort of stood out as what was necessary. You know, like because I on all of my stuff and everything that I preach, you know, is all mind, body, spirit, right? You know, you have to address all three and as simultaneously as possible to facilitate healing at the deepest levels. And so really, you know, between, you know, craniosacral's ability to address, you know, energy and this musculoskeletal system and hypnotherapy's ability to address those underlying beliefs, really like that is kind of what really struck me. And so, you know, back to my back injury, you know, I was able to manage the pain very effectively. I could keep it at bay. Everything was good. I was able to function as a normal person, have kids and all the other things. I know. But then I would still occasionally backslide, you know, like I moved houses or I wasn't stretching or doing all the things. And then, oh, shit, you know, like
you are allowed to swear on this show.
Oh,
like,
okay, great.
No.
Shit.
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah.
And then
not
like
on the radio. Yes, here.
Yeah. Like I just like, you know, totally fall over and like be screwed for a few days until I could get moving again. And then this was actually, right at the beginning of COVID, like right when my business was completely shut down locally. And I had more time for some studying, and I went, I went to a hypnotherapy session first. And I had a hypnotherapy session, which I'd done many before. And like any kind of therapy, sometimes it does take, you know, you're working through layers, right? You know, and so this one, I really didn't have a huge goal in mind. It was just kind of I'm just working towards doing better, fine tuning the practitioner. You know, there's nothing, you know, better for your clients than a well-tuned therapist, right? And so I went in and I won't tell you all about the session, but I had a huge breakthrough. Like it was like one of those like smack in the face. Like I had never fucking thought of that way at all. Oh, wow. And just really changed a lot for me. Like I left, like I cried a lot and it was, you know, pretty heavy, but then I left and was like, shit, like how much of my life has this controlled? And I had a craniosacral session scheduled right after that.
For you to perform or for someone to do on you?
For someone to do on me. Okay. Because I practice what I preach, damn it. Yeah. Sometimes, not all the time, but like as much as I can. And so I went and I was just like, I was pretty spent as far as, you know, emotion. I was just like, I just, you know, want to chill and, you know, not talk, because sometimes during craniosacral sessions we do like guided imagery and a little bit more, you know, dialogue with the inner physician, or the inner wisdoms, or some words that, you know, you'll hear us use. And I was just like, I don't have that in me right now. Like I just need to clear things out. Yeah. Right. You know, and so she did the session. I don't remember the session at all. Like it was one of those that I completely do not remember. But when I went to get up after the session, I noticed my back, like the little thing that's always there that had been there since I was 14 was not there. And I would not let myself fully acknowledge it. Like I knew consciously that it wasn't there, but I would not acknowledge it because that would be too hopeful.
Too good to be true.
Right.
Yeah.
like, it'll be back. I'm just really relaxed right now.
Yeah.
It'll be back.
Yeah.
And
Speaking that into existence.
yeah, so like I just went about my business, and it never came back at all. And that was,
Wow.
a couple years ago now.
Yeah.
And like
A couple years ago, like 2020, or a couple years ago, like 2018?
2020.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of times when people say a couple
And
years ago,
I know,
days,
right?
they
That's
mean
often what I
over.
mean.
Yeah.
I only know because this was literally like I was doing this whole healing period during the beginning of COVID because
Awesome.
I couldn't work on a bunch of people. And,
Yeah.
Right.
and technically we weren't supposed to be doing cranio sessions either, but we were both craniosacral therapists, so we
Right.
just kept working on
taking
each
care of yourselves.
Yeah. And so it was just like, wow. I knew, I mean, of course, after all of that time, I knew there was this huge mind-body connection. I really believed that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the back of my mind, it was like, this was a physical injury. I was in a car accident. I physically hurt myself.
Yeah.
This was not mind body, right? This was something that was just beyond that, right?
Just body.
And there you go.
There you go.
And
some beliefs got smashed into it in the car accident.
exactly. I mean, that's what happens. Like, it really, like, it's crazy how, and I don't want to say crazy. I don't like to use the word crazy. You're not
Right.
crazy. Mental health is not for people that are crazy. It's for everybody. It's so wild to see the way the subconscious works and the way those beliefs can act. And just after working with enough people to see, what things can create, what beliefs can create what outcomes for you. It's just like,
For good or for better.
for good or for bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
good, better, or really not good at all.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating. And I also think that, bringing that around, that like smack you in the face of beliefs, like that's another thing I really wanted to talk about, was just like, I think trauma is becoming far more recognized as a thing,
Oy.
right? Like people, mainstream medicine is recognizing the mind-body connection. Like, a lot more people are open to the idea that, trauma causes some real shit.
It's
for
getting
people.
to the point where people are tired of hearing the word.
Right.
And I'm like, that's a good thing, because it just
Well-
needs to be something we know and we talk about.
And a lot of that being, I really think, because they don't relate it to themselves. They can see how, these people in the Ukraine are being terribly traumatized, right? They can see how, someone who's like mugged or raped or something is, or who was molested as a child or something. They're like, oh, I can see their trauma.
Being bullied at school or bullied at work or whatever it is.
Yeah, but I'm not
that's
traumatized. Yeah. It's not me.
Yeah.
And even if something
Because
bad happened to me,
trauma-
I don't see how it affects me.
And we don't think of the bad things that happen to us as trauma. I think our
Right.
culture is so used to feeling shitty and so used to bad stuff happening that we don't think of, if we can't just call all the trauma, because then we would be surrounded by it.
And we are.
And so I think that's an acknowledgement phase that we haven't hit yet, because like, if we were to actually call all the trauma, because there's different kinds of trauma. Trauma isn't always just being thrown up against the wall by an abusive parent. Like,
Yeah.
traumas can be very small, very tiny moments, no physical pain, or a little drip over a long period of time. And we think,
Exactly.
when we hear the word trauma, I think a lot of people visualize a giant violent
Blunt
monster.
force trauma versus
Mm-hmm.
other
But like,
kinds.
traumas can be like a creaking door in your bedroom at night when you were a child. Like, it can be very small stuff. That was an analogy. Like, I've never actually heard of somebody being
Like a physical,
knows?
a physical phenomena that then starts
a large physical
psychological
phenomenon. It has to be a large one. It can't just be your mom slapped you because you used a swear word at dinner. That can't be a trauma.
Right.
That can't really be a trauma.
Or even
it has to be
just
a
something
large
you saw
one.
on TV. Like, I was 3 and I snuck in and I was watching a movie and this woman died while she was giving birth, which means like I should never get pregnant because I could die giving birth.
Exactly.
I mean, it's very sneaky.
I'm going to take a moment and interrupt and ask you to move your microphone to the other side of your face and a little lower. There you go. Because sometimes it isn't picking up on you because you're sort of talking past it.
Okay. Is this
Perfect.
better?
That's great.
Lovely.
And people can see your beautiful face better.
What were we? Yeah, like with the complex PTSD, right? Like that is just such a different beast, and it's so easy for people to not and honestly, even the big traumas, even people who have been raped or have been in war or something will still not recognize that it was like, it might have been a traumatic thing for them, but they're fine. It didn't traumatize them.
Right. There's a difference between trauma being the incident of a thing that happens and trauma like my trauma. Like
you're coping with the thing.
My feelings of trauma.
It's not affecting me. Like Right. And so, both of those things being huge factors in our lack of ability or lack of willingness to address this huge elephant in the room of like, we just want to look at the Ukraine crisis, and get angry at Russia and say Russia's just a bad thing and we hate those Russians. And then, I've seen crazy stuff. I think we talked a little bit about this, but I actually have a friend she's a nail tech, and she's going to a training, and she was going to a training for, I think it's in like the next month or two or something. Yeah. And it's for Russian manicures. And now they're like changing it to Ukrainian manicures.
Oh,
because
my God.
They can't sell Russian manicures. And,
but they're only not going to be able to sell Russian manicures for like 2 months.
Right.
Because then it will be something else.
Right. And, but like, that's the thing is like, we're going to look at and call them bad instead of saying, how did that happen? Why are they doing
this? This is the progressive version of freedom fries when they stopped calling them French fries. Right. And the left made fun of the right for being xenophobic idiots.
Well, and that's the thing is there is no left and right.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. That's just this thing we've made up. We've
been given that thing to fight each other over.
Right. Yeah. And it's very convenient. But the fact of the matter is, like, we're all here, like, the same people. Yeah. Literally. And that's not just some thing people say that's like peace and love and we're all the same and shit. Like, for seriously, like we are. And it's insane to be, trying to say that we're in any way separate. And, so like, it's
artificial,
but that's trauma. That's how trauma works. Trauma, it puts you into this, sort of, it's a heightened state of the nervous system, where you're stuck, but it's a very tribal, very ancestral.
I feel unwell or unsafe. Therefore, something bad must have happened. And in order for something bad to have happened, there must have been a bad person or entity that did the bad thing. And if I can find out who the bad person or bad thing
and defeat them,
then I won't feel badly anymore.
Right.
And that's why I think we're locked, especially in the U.S., we're locked into this cycle of being given the next bad thing to be mad at because we're in such an unhealthy and unhappy and
we're very
unsafe
used to
state.
It's comfortable for us.
Whatever the next bad guy is, it gives us the little bit of endorphins that we're going to fight it and we're going to win and we're going to complete the fight or flight cycle and then we'll feel better.
Exactly. And it is because we've just been doing the same thing. It's the same reason that you see, your best friend who's got she's always dating these awful guys, and they're always the same jackass. But the thing is, like, this new jackass fits beautifully in where her old jackass was, and she doesn't have to change her whole life and her whole the way she views
and
everything.
Maybe this one will be different, which will make all the other ones worth it.
Right. And if she were to embrace like this amazing, new guy who doesn't really fit in that spot, she'd have to change everything, which is very scary and uncomfortable.
She would have to love differently. And those love imprints were developed when she was very young.
Very young. And so she's very used to doing that same thing. And that's what we're doing. We're just continuing to date the same jackass over and over again.
Well, it's prescribed jackass.
Yes.
Like in our culture, there's
in
what
the
they
US
call
at least.
Public relations. And public relations is about solidifying group think into a externalized enemy and they just keep prescribing the enemy. So the Cold War was the boogeyman. Everybody could be a commie for a while. And then suddenly it was drugs
Yeah.
So we all have to
The war on drugs.
be against the drugs. And then terrorism was great because it was super abstract.
Right.
Anybody
Osama
could
bin
be
Laden.
a terrorist.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then when we moved into the COVID narrative, it was really about a virus, which you can't see.
Right.
And so it could be anywhere, which did,
Anyone
I think,
could have
something
it.
to people's.
Oh, that is traumatic as all. I mean, like really, when we're talking about trauma, that's how I can very comfortably say every person on this planet has lived through trauma. Because regardless of how your life went before, like this last couple of years has been so traumatizing. I actually was talking to someone, and I will, use different names and everything for like HIPAA purposes, but she was working with a client for weight loss because this woman had been very overweight, but then she lost like a ton of weight, like 100 pounds, right? And right before COVID. And then she gained it all back and more. And she's working with her on like why and what happened, and like, we've all been dealing with a lot of anxiety with it. And there's a lot of negative habits we've picked up and a lot of other stuff. But long story short, through this therapy, that it had turned out that the underlying belief was, well, I'm going to die. COVID's going to kill me. So I might as well eat whatever I want. And this woman wasn't like a non-functioning, crazy, like person on the street or something that was just, this is just a normal person. And that's just a sort of an example of the kind of underlying beliefs that,
start running your life.
That, I mean, was showing up in the way her body looked because she was putting on weight. But gosh, how else was that affecting her life? And who else is holding very similar beliefs around that? Like, well, I'm going to die from COVID, or, a lot of people I love are going to die because of COVID, or, this is just, there's a ton of things that can come up that are like, whoa, when you realize that, it's like, that's a big deal. That's a heavy thing to be walking around with.
I feel as though it sort of smushed everybody down into this way of being. Like it took everybody down a notch. Not everybody, obviously, and not all the same notch, but like kind of
a cultural
like
generalization.
Kneading bread dough, like we're going to need a little more trauma in, we're going to need a little more trauma in, we're going to need a little, and just like people internalized a ton of beliefs during the last couple of years that are affecting and will continue to affect their lives without challenge because they don't know that that's happened to them.
I think there's in the Buddhism I used to practice, there's a phrase of turning poison into medicine.
Yeah.
And since this idea of the mind-body thing is fairly new in the establishment,
pretty old, but fairly
in the
old,
establishment
in the West,
narrative, in the West, in the establishment narrative of the West, since it's fairly new, this guy's like, hey, I should write a book about this because it's not supposed to happen, right? So that's just working its way in to our systems here, and it feels like a traumatic event like the last 2 years. This so many, like what you're saying, so many little traumas, so many ratcheting up where people, it's the frog in the boiling water thing, where people just get used to it and accept
it's
it.
normal.
Yeah.
We
all got used to it being way shittier really fast suddenly.
So I feel like the poison and turning this poison into medicine is really, this provides the opportunity for us to deal with something that we can all share, a shared trauma, to talk about trauma in general.
Yeah, exactly.
And say, hey, something happened.
Yeah.
And we had a guest early on last year, Joseph Myers. He coined the term, I think, amygdala hijack, of how your amygdala gets hijacked with a trauma. And at that point, you're in a reactive state and no longer in an active,
You've
conscious
stepped outside your window of
state.
capacity or your window of tolerance, and then you're,
Right. So a lot of us got hijacked. Our amygdala got hijacked during this thing where we just have to be in response to the story or the message, and we have to continue to be in response and not think about what's happening or what happened to us or what we're doing to other people in our trauma state. So I feel like
I have to take care of myself.
Right.
Having, because if you start talking about childhood trauma or incest, then immediately there are people who are like, ew, I don't want to even talk about that.
Or
I'm sorry
that's
that
cool,
happened
but
to
it has
you.
nothing to do with
or it
me.
happened to me, but I don't, right? So to have a shared trauma like this, the way the narrative came out, I think I think most everybody could agree that the narrative, maybe we learned some things and we don't do it the same way we did it last time.
Yeah.
Because I think there were documents in Germany and in England, and I haven't seen the documents in the United States, where they were basically saying we need to...
The government was saying on purpose.
The government, we need to scare people into compliance because they're not going to comply. And if they don't comply, we're all going to die, because there was this idea of the impact of the virus in the beginning. So prepare for the worst. And that scared people. And then they don't have a back door for people to come out of that fear and out of that trauma.
They didn't have a plan in place for walking people back from the traumatized state that they put people in order to get them to comply with what they thought were the necessary measures to protect everybody from the virus.
Right.
So as the virus effects lessened and lessened, there wasn't a plan in place by these governments that
to ratchet it down.
Well, that never has been. This is far from the first time that this has ever happened. I mean, this is actually a normal thing. And when we're talking about doing it better this time, I'd go back way further than that and look at, I think we had talked about this before about, people are sick of hearing, the word trauma, and they get kind of frustrated with the, those millennials, and they're so, they're so
everybody's wounded,
and they're so,
snowflake,
and
man up and get your shit done.
My grandparents lived through the Depression, and
they weren't traumatized.
They went and fought in the World War and all this stuff, and they were. Yeah. They absolutely were, and there's a ton of generational trauma there, and
we just weren't talking about it.
We weren't talking about it. We called it shell shock when soldiers came back and had horrible nightmares and would just drink all the time and
abuse their loved ones,
and it was just normal,
right?
But we didn't recognize the secondhand mental health stuff that comes from that, and the way that it affects you. Just being around them and the way it perpetuates down a line of people, my husband, is American Indian, and just like looking at the generational trauma that comes down from that, which was not that long ago. Right. I mean, his grandmother passed away a couple of weeks ago, who lived in the boarding schools that they had,
my God.
She grew up, and like,
Did she ever talk about that?
She did a little bit with, she wouldn't really talk through it. I wouldn't say that there was that level, but actually one of the first times I met her, I was interviewing her for the archives because I was in history class where that was, we had to find somebody to interview. But anyway, it was really, it wasn't recognized as trauma. It was like, I lived through hard stuff, and that really resonates with me because I think I was that person for a really long time. I graduated from high school when I was 14, and I was in college full time by the time I was 15. I had multiple full-time jobs.
This is you?
This is me. Yeah. And I don't talk about it a lot actually because it
makes people think you must be
a genius. That was the big word that everybody would always use, like, like I actually applied for a job when I was 16, and the lady was like, wow, I've never met a genius before. And I'm like, oh God,
right.
Like, I'm not a genius. I'm good at school. I'm, great at reading books and reiterating, stuff.
Regurgitating for tests.
Right. But, so anyway, but I had a lot. I mean, I had a lot on my plate. I did a lot of things. I don't want to throw my mother under the bus on anything. Like, everybody lives the way they do for, because of the circumstances, and the support that they had and the mental capacity they had at the time. And, but she wasn't the support that I needed in that. And I felt that I needed to support her largely. I bought the family's car because we didn't have a car, when I was 15, and like, it was a lot. But I was like, okay with that because that's just what I had to do. And I stepped up and I did it. And for a long time, that's how I felt. And then I didn't really start to notice. I mean, I knew going through a really hard childhood was traumatizing, but I wasn't traumatized, so I was fine.
You didn't go through a really hard childhood.
Yeah, like I went through a hard childhood, but I was fine. Like, I was
Yeah.
totally okay. It was just the way it happened.
That's so funny that you were like going into mental health and trauma work and then also thinking, but not you.
But not me. Yeah, it was totally not me. And like, people do this very effectively until I started looking at, kids that were in college, and taking 12 credits and just like so stressed out and just, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Like, I just like, this is so much pressure and so much stress and I can't handle this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're taking 12 credits and working a part-time job. I was working 60 hours a week and taking 19 credits minimum.
Oh, no.
And, and I had a baby when I was 19.
Fallacy
and still
of relative privation.
Oh, yeah. Like, and I was pretty good about not saying it, but that was what I thought. That was what
your
went in.
vibe.
I was
And that's in the mix.
yeah. You know, and so I get exactly how insidious that shit is because, like I said, I was literally studying this.
Yes.
And I didn't see it in myself.
Do you feel as though there was a shame element? Because I think that's
For sure.
a lot of the reason why, and I have a devil's advocate thing to something you said earlier.
Okay.
I think that's a lot of why many demographics of people don't want to or have decided that they are not traumatized because that would be seen as a kind of weakness.
Absolutely. Well, and it's normal. It's actually when you study trauma, that's part of what trauma is. So when you exit that window of capacity,
I was weak and I will not be again.
Yes. Like I'm going to butcher this, but basically so the infant is well within their window of capacity where their nervous system is functioning optimally, and below it there's not enough tone to the nervous system, and above it there's too much. It's too intense, right? So like down here is like depression, malaise, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And up here is like anxiety, panic, terror.
So you're talking about regulation versus dysregulation on either side.
And so like the infant is well within their window of capacity, and then like something happens, they're hungry or they, poop in their diaper or whatever, and they cry.
They become dysregulated.
Right. They not yet. They cry because help. Right. I need help.
Right.
And then, that they start to go up, but then the caregiver comes and they're okay and they stay within their window of capacity. But then when the caregiver does not come and it escalates outside of that window, and then it continues escalating through these very defined points where first your, like terror comes in because,
what if I'm alone?
I have no caregiver. I'm going to die alone here because I can't help myself.
I'm a tiny animal.
Right. And it goes through this whole thing, which doesn't just pertain to infants. Like there's like when you first go through terror, right? Because like you're being chased by a bear or something. And like, so first you're running, first it's flight to get away. And then you're like, I am not going to be able to get away. They're here. So then it's fight, that as it escalates further. And so it's like a different hormonal cascade. And then when you realize like, I can't beat them, I'm most likely going to die. And so then you bottom out
to the freeze.
Hard. And you freeze and you bottom out. And so hopefully the predator doesn't want to kill you anymore because it's no fun. It's just flopping around. Or if they do eat you, you're flooded with these like hormones where it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm gonna die anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And it's not as terrifying and horrible.
Right.
So that is a normal thing because then once you hit that point, there's a tremendous shame. I wasn't able to get away. I was not able to fight it off. I was not, and so because I was not able to get away or fight it off, I failed. I failed so badly. I'm not worth living. Like I'm not worthy of life. And so that's a normal progression of that trauma and shame pattern.
You keep talking about the nerves and the nervous system and this cardiologist's work on how Transcendental Meditation
that was beyond his work, but based on it,
affected people's cardiovascular system, enabling them to heat themselves up or cool themselves down, or raise or lower their heart rate. Stonefruit Media on YouTube asked a while ago if you believe consciousness lives in the nerves or in the blood, seeing as we have nearly 70,000 miles of capillaries in our system. And I'm not exactly sure what he means by consciousness, but when we're talking about the mind-body connection, do you feel any more weight for either of those particular systems?
Well, my first instinct is to say, what's the difference? We're all one. There's no separation between us, right?
Only the illusion of separation.
Only the illusion of separation.
Oh, it's just your intestines.
Right. But what I think they're probably getting at, so that what we know about the nervous system and the nervous system, like how the nervous system functions, is constantly evolving. And the big thing over the last decade or so has been fascia and connective tissue. And we used to be like, when you were doing dissections, like even when I was just doing dissections, in my initial anatomy classes, and you would like peel that stuff off, and that's that annoying filmy shit we just pull off and throw away because it doesn't do anything. And like, it really, like, it was just like,
are you serious?
Yes. Like, it was very discounted, and maybe it would give some structure and support to things, but it wasn't an important thing. And this, like, for people that don't have an anatomy background, like when you're eating steak or anything like that, like filmy, thin stuff, right? That's fascia. And the fascial system is actually a singular integrated piece that wraps around and through basically everything in your body. It bundles around every single muscle cell, muscle bundle, muscle belly. It holds the muscle to the bone, as well as forms the tendons and ligaments that support the musculoskeletal system.
I feel like my entire system is just sort of feeling tired hearing you mention all of the things that the fascia is doing.
It's going everywhere. It like folds through the folds of the brain, like everything. And it's not just for structure. It is actually, when you look at healthy fascia, it should be a very gel-like sort of matrix, like a web that moves. They call it the web of life.
So people were discounting the fascia because
they were only looking at dead fascia.
They thought that it wasn't malleable to be worth investigating.
Right, because it's very different in living tissue than it is in dead tissue.
It's just the bag to hold things together.
Right. And
the skin inside the eggshell.
Exactly. Which is also, I mean, interestingly, in craniosacral therapy, there's this huge, so in craniosacral therapy, there's always been the understanding that the cranial bones move. Your skull is actually made up of quite a few different bones, not just one solid piece, and that they can move and move around each other and accommodate changing intracranial pressure. But then, mainstream medicine said, no, it's one, like it's made of separate bones when you're born so that your skull can fit through the vaginal canal.
Right.
But then by the time you're I think 4, it's fused.
You don't have little holes in your head anymore.
Right. However, that really came out of most of the studies that, they had done that had a foundation in that sort of medicine back in the 1800s was done on embalmed cadavers, and embalming completely freezes everything, and whereas then there was other parts of the world where they were doing those same sorts of anatomy dissections but on fresh cadavers, and they had always accepted that the bones of the skull were not fused. And so now we know that for a fact they are not. We have the capability to go in and look at the tissue in the sutures that, between the bones and go, oh, this is not osseous tissue. This is connective tissue. And
they're like tectonic plates on the planet.
Yeah. Like we know now that they, they're not like moving all over the place like your elbow joint or your hip joint, but they are moving. They're mobile. So, but back to, fascia, healthy fascia is actually a big part of the nervous system and nerve conduction for the way we conduct, nerve signals throughout the body,
Damn.
like the way the nervous system can tell the blood vessels to dilate or to constrict or whatever. And so if I was going to imagine where consciousness lives in the body, I like to imagine it everywhere. But the place where it crosses from energetic to physical happens within that connective tissue.
Epic.
Great answer.
Thanks.
Stonefruit Media is in the process of launching an institution that is about psychedelic integration.
Yeah.
There are actually a few higher education institutions that offer, like, I guess what you could call trip sitting as a class.
I actually just got Facebook
What they call it,
sponsored
psychedelic
ad
integration.
targeted this morning by the first accredited master's program in psychedelic integration and studies. So
That's
there is
amazing.
now in the U.S. and I'd have to look back up to see what it was because I was like, oh, cool, screenshot, because I'm not going to do it. But like, I also was like, oh, that's really amazing,
Right.
because I'd noticed that there was,
This is a great change.
like, right.
Yeah.
And like, this is at like a real pharmacy school where they're, teaching about all of this. And it's just fantastic that that's being more accepted.
I think I had a sense when I was in my early 20s in LA that as we progress as humans in society, that the final civil rights battle would be for cognitive liberty.
Yeah.
For the ability to integrate ourselves, since we are not being integrated through our school systems or through our medical systems or our psychological systems. That when we stop the prohibition on neurochemical experimentation and people are allowed to start working out their own consciousness instead of having it just be a theoretical thing, that would be the shift that ends all this nonsense of public relations and us and being manipulated from outside, when we could actually begin to manipulate ourselves.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I don't know how close we are to that.
I don't either.
I would like to think that we are making progress all the time towards that. It's so interesting to really think about when you say like public relations and, being manipulated by extra. I mean, this is not new with television or anything. I mean, for thousands of years, that is what has happened.
How people
Mythology.
empower, manage, how people empower, manage the consensus of the citizens in order to achieve certain goals.
Exactly. And
usually not for their benefit.
It necessary to, as I enter into this part of the discussion, to preface with, I don't think it's inherently bad. I don't. I think often necessary, for certain, like to survive disasters and things, right? Like when we were talking about like the government's not knowing how bad COVID was going to be and, instating this fear in people. I mean, man, when you don't know, like, is this the zombie apocalypse? Like, oh shit, like everybody's going to die from this. And like, we need to be able to respond quickly. And that's why we do that. That's why we're designed that way.
Right. Best case scenario,
be able to,
that would be a helpful thing to do.
Yeah. Like it's not bad.
When I lived in Los Angeles, where there's grinding poverty right across the street from obscene wealth, and it's 112 degrees, and there's income inequality everywhere. And only one person got murdered, and the news would be like, "Oh my God, tragedy in East LA! Somebody was murdered." And I was like,
"Yeah,
that's a miracle. It's a miracle that only one person was murdered in the desert,
carrying pitchforks into the mansions and overthrowing everything." Yeah,
I stopped fighting that at that point and was like, "Oh, we are managed because we don't want to." I think that was the thing is I'm a sovereign human being. I can do whatever I want, but we're being managed. Society, there's management to society, and so. I became in awe that food could travel on trucks through 20 million people in the desert and it wasn't being mobbed, and poop got hauled away.
The psychology of infrastructure. Yeah. I
started going, okay, all right. I think there was this apocalyptic daydream of chaos
Right at the beginning of all of this, when it's like, okay, all our credit card debt's gonna be wiped out,
Exactly,
and we're gonna like.
I think, and I've had this theory since Y2K that I think we gravitate towards apocalyptic theories because we're not happy with our lives and we're not happy in our lives.
Yeah.
And the idea of something sweeping it all away so we could just be raw humans again and survive by our own wits is really attractive to people who haven't, I think, understood that we are being managed in ways that I think and that's what a government's supposed to do, is
Right.
oversee the management of. But for some reason, I don't think we talk about it that way anymore. It really has become a top-down instead of us giving power to
Someone
empower
help
tools
us
to help us manage ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, like, and at what point when those systems start getting used for the few and to benefit the few instead of the many, do the many say, "Hey, we need to redirect"?
Well, it's not as much at what point, how.
Right.
I mean, obviously, like, we want to change that as soon as we can, as soon as we notice it happening, but how?
But it's the recognition of the problem, I think, is the first thing. We are changing the problem because we haven't fully admitted the problem.
Right. The recognition, and this goes back to exactly what we were talking about with trauma. You can't work through trauma. You can't change your trauma response. You can't bring your nervous system back into regulation until you've recognized that it's dysregulated.
Right.
And a lot of people want to skip that part.
Right.
They want to skip the recognizing that I am not with it in some kind of way.
I wish we could find those tweets that Evno sent to us during a previous show. It was a series of tweets about how our culture is geared up to everybody wants to be a hero and save people from disaster, but we don't want to do the work to prevent disasters.
We're much more wired and much better at acute trauma care rather than chronic trauma care.
The way that I really see that, and the thing that really just jumps out right away when we start to talk about that, is everybody is like, I'm ready to do hard work. I am ready to do hard work. I am ready to work. And when they say I'm ready to do hard work, I'm ready to do the hard stuff, they think that means working 100 hours a week or something.
Right.
Versus actually probably working 10 hours a week, but just doing stuff that's painful and awful, and you would rather not do that. And I mean, any kind of behavioral change situation, like just going back to something that's very relatable to any person, you're stressed and overwhelmed and you have anxiety and you really, you want to lose weight or get in shape or whatever, and you want to make all these changes in your life. But where would I even start? You know that you need to drink more water and meal prep and, organize your schedule to where you're, cleaning your house from this time to this time and then playing with your kids from this time to this time, and like.
Or I can just get an endorphin rush right now.
Exactly. Or I could just spend the next 6 hours scrolling around on Facebook and not do any of those things. And it's the fact of the matter is that is so much easier. It's so much easier than actually changing the way you live your life, because the changing effectively and permanently changing the way you live your life means changing your identity and the way you identify yourself. You can force yourself to go to the gym, for 6 months to get in shape and lose weight for your wedding or whatever. But you can't force yourself to do that for the rest of your life. You can become someone who just goes to the gym. That's what you do every day. You love going to the gym. It's fun. It's a part of your way. It's who you are. And when you become that person and you remove the underlying beliefs and barriers that make you hate it or that make you, try to avoid it or anything like that, then
feel guilty for going.
Being guilty for going because you should be doing something else. Whatever. I mean, there's a million. We can't name all of the underlying beliefs because there's way too many. But it's actually changing who you are to be able to do that, and changing the way we are as a society from reactionary and looking at like those damn Russians to going, oh, why is that happening?
Right.
and not, and like really doing work to look and to understand the different sides and the, you know, the pull from different things. That's hard.
It's not something that a lot of people have time, energy, or skills to do.
Right.
We're not
exactly.
given those skills, and most of us don't feel like we have the time or the energy.
So instead, I'll just feel good about myself.
I'll
now,
change my profile
quickly.
picture to blue and yellow.
Right.
So people know that I care.
Dump out some Russian vodka
Yep.
on the street, and I have succeeded in being a good person today.
Well, it's a signal.
Not to say that's bad. I mean,
Well,
if
and
that's where
I
you
know-
are and that's where your capacity level's at,
Yes.
that's okay.
And I know
no
that the
one's
people that are
judging
doing
for
those
that.
things are doing them because they care.
Right. They're doing them because
And
they
that
care.
caring is important, and we've just been impotized. We don't have the ability to like do big shit. Like
Right.
most of us are not going to go to the Ukrainian-Russian border and start handing out supplies.
Right.
So
Or-
I'll change my Facebook profile picture.
Or, you know, start, you know, doing things like to dialogue with other countries and, you know, like
become some kind of ambassador.
right, and like find out why is this happening and what's he doing? What's the motivation there? Why suddenly does this country that was already seemed to be doing pretty well, why are they all of a sudden forcing themselves on this other country and risking nuclear war and causing all, like, there's what's going on?
There's some causes involved.
There's causes.
There are.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I don't know. Geez, I'm not an international relations specialist. I'm not telling you I understand
took us
it,
a long
but I
time.
know there's more stuff there.
It took us and only just to do a brief segue, because I do want to keep on the topic of trauma rather than politics.
For sure.
But it did take us a very long time to find anybody that was saying any big picture about what's going on with Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
But like the simplest version that's coming out in the data is that the U.S. had placed several bioweapon labs in Ukraine on the Russian border.
Okay.
And Putin was like, I don't want there to be bioweapon labs on my country's border, so I'm going to bomb them. You guys have this much time to leave before I bomb them. And then he did. Now, I don't know what's still going on. I know a lot of it has escalated because of sanctions and stuff going on with NATO. This is what happens a lot of the time with bad parenting, is that the kid acts out because of something wrong in their environment, and then they get punished, and then they act out more, and then they get punished, and they act out more, without the parent ever going in and being like, wait, why were you
are you
acting
doing
out?
this? Yes.
And can we fix that problem?
And this is such a good way to illustrate how individual trauma and collective trauma
ripples.
are the same thing.
Yes.
They're the same thing. And so if you really want to do something, if you want to not feel so impotent, it's really about working on yourself and your own trauma and recognizing, and that doesn't have to mean going to a therapist, every week for years. I mean, that's great. If you have access to that, if you have, the capability to do things
You
like
might
that.
just start with reading some books or scrolling through some therapy Instagram.
Or just going, shit, am I traumatized?
Right.
Am I traumatized?
Why did I just think
am
that
I
way?
doing things like
Yeah.
this? And just opening that door.
This is a big theme of season 3, actually, for us. Season 2 was a lot, after getting kicked out of the radio station at the end of season 1, season 2 became a lot about trauma and how Dark and I needed to get way more trauma informed so that we do things like a disclaimer at the beginning of the show and be like, we're going to talk about tough shit. And if you're not in a place in your life where you have extra energy to dally with some tough shit, don't watch.
That might challenge your grasp on reality.
Yeah, because it's going to be alarming at some point. And so we became way more trauma informed in season 2 because I think we thought that everybody else got off on challenging themselves the same way that we do, very naively. And we were very bold in our perspectives on COVID data, and we were very bold in our perspectives on Democrats versus Republicans. And a lot of friends got really shocked, shell-shocked by those boldness without any cushion around what we were saying. And so season 2 is a lot about becoming more trauma informed, and season 3 has been a lot about getting it local. Maybe we're not going to do a giant citizen rebellion globally, but what we can absolutely do is decentralize the revolution and start taking care of myself, taking care of my loved ones, taking care of my literal town.
Yeah.
Which is literally where it's always needed to start. Always.
And and if we can just all do that, then we would all do that.
Yes. We're all doing the best we can with what we have, and that absolutely includes your current level of capacity and programming and the way you're thinking right now. And so I think it's got to be clear that this is not judgment on people who aren't ready to do that. I think, man, we can go in a million different directions with this. I mean, like
every moment, it just goes like this.
Well, like when I think about like the body positivity movement,
Ooh,
right?
Yeah.
And, there's all of these people that are very upset about it because they think that it's glorifying obesity and all this. And it's like, I get it. I get why you might think that. But the fact is, there's a lot of people who will never lose weight because they hate their body.
Right.
And if they can learn to love their body, then they can take care of their body better, which will obviously lead to, being in better shape and losing weight. What
is a prescription for somebody to learn to love their body? That's not an easy task.
No, I mean, I
think the body positivity is a part of that. I think when we talk about artificial divides, we hear PC culture or woke culture and people who are a part of that and people who hate that. I feel like the PC movement is always coming out of a need for some serious change.
Yeah.
And then there's overreach.
Yeah.
It goes too far. People start to do it as an identity rather than a movement.
PC principle, for sure.
And that rather than combating the PC culture, we have to understand that it had value in use, acknowledge the value in use.
Yeah.
And then before we start talking about the overstep and the overreach.
Yeah.
So that people who say, we haven't been heard and we're going to do this until we're heard, you say, okay, we hear you. Also, there's more to it than your focus on it. This is an integrated system that we have to integrate into.
Yeah.
And I think we get divided into the woke or the unwoke instead of actually saying all this is useful. How do we do it better?
And that's, because balance is hard. I mean, Buddhism, right? The idea that everything has to remain in balance. If we could just throw everything this way and have everything come out great, we would do that. We'd have done that a long time ago. But because it has to be balanced, between, like both sides of the spectrum, that's hard. And it's not just hard, but it's continuous work. You can't just do it and then it's done. It's always there.
Right. We've talked about on the show where when we, as a culture, decided to face racism and start dealing with it in a larger way, that we did not get rid of prejudice, but we displaced prejudice into other places.
Yeah.
It's not like the prejudice went away. It just suddenly it became fashionable to hate racists.
Yeah.
Instead of maybe understanding where that, again, why
would
that
somebody
way?
do that?
How did they come about that way?
Well, but we don't ask that question. And
so
this
you
is
can
my
just
theory.
hate the racist now.
Yeah.
You can take your hate against a race and say, okay, it's not fashionable anymore. Now I'm going to hate the people who hate those people.
Yeah.
It's just a displacement.
Which is not healing. It's not changing anything.
I completely agree. And I would like you guys to make me give you the name of and the link to. So I went to a wonderful lecture on the Sunday before Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and it was a lecture for a Buddhist Sangha, but it was the lecturer was a woman of color, and she's a meditation instructor at Spirit Rock in California, which is a meditation center, and they do a lot of cool retreat things and whatever. But she was talking about something that I'd never really heard about, and I had to go Google, and I definitely am not the person to lecture on it, but it's called equanimity.
Equanimity,
yes.
Not equality or equity.
Right. And, it's just really like, and her focus was on, on everything, but on specifically racism and her own personal journey to, learn that there is a balance between fighting racism, which has to be done. Like, we can't just accept racism as a thing.
Correct.
But also not hating the people who are racist, and, really realizing that the racism that is so just ingrained in the U.S. happened for a reason. You know, we were a young country who was fighting for existence, and, you know, slave labor was at least perceived as necessary. And of course, in order to justify that in our minds and make it okay to have slaves, we had to see Black people as less.
And
as less than.
Some interpretations of the mainstream religion of the time and their religious texts allowed people to
it was considered
make it okay
acceptable
because people with darker skin were sons of Noah's cursed son,
right,
who disobeyed God.
There was a lot of really just pulling whatever you wanted out of, you know, interpretation is so easy to do. I mean,
now
like
we
you can
have
interpret for your own purposes.
We have some people today who are actually hold prejudices for some reason, and then a ton of people who don't hold any malignant prejudices, but are just poorly educated and poorly exposed when it comes to different races and how you should think about that in your head.
Right. And that's, you know, really when you think about it, comes down to their, you know, lack of ability or lack of capacity to stop and say, is that true? Is that true, or is it my perception?
Maybe never having hung out with anybody who wasn't white.
Right. You know.
So equanimity is defined as mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation.
Yes.
Is that the word you're looking for? Okay.
And really just like I said, this is open to any, you know, direction of things. But that the focus of that lecture, of course, because it was right before Martin Luther King Jr. Day, was about racism. And, you know, that she would want to hate racists. She was, you know, a Black woman growing up in the U.S. and there's a lot of hard shit that happened to her that shouldn't have and was not okay. But calling the people that were racist evil was not only not helpful, but damaging to her.
Yeah.
And realizing that, you know, in any capacity, you know, look at like governmental powers and saying, you know, those bastards in power that are doing this to us, well, they're doing it for a reason. You know, it can't, like, is it a justifiable and universally ethical reason? You know, debatable, but it's for a reason. There was circumstances that led up to that, and they are most likely doing so believing that they are right to do so.
That's why I thought you're familiar with this term, the Great Reset.
And then some people are actually psychopaths and sociopaths.
There are. I mean, that is
but very few and very far away from.
Well, we glorify those folks in our society. We glorify sociopaths into positions of power. People who would take on those positions of power.
How so?
Or gravitate towards. Well, I was raised on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, which was not about people who were contributing to society with their ideas. It was about overt displays of wealth as a goal to get rich. Not that you may have gotten rich from your works, but just to become greedy. That was so much of my childhood on television.
I don't know that it's changed much, other than it's not as, you know, now that it's just all over social media.
Not as right.
Yeah.
So I feel like when we there's the we've talked about this before on the show. There was a social experiment where they went into a high rise as a metaphor that the most powerful people are on the higher floors and the least powerful people are on the lower floors. So they put a coffee station at the elevator on every floor and said, we're going to try this experiment, people on the floor. If here's a kitty to put some money in, here's a tip jar. And if we get enough tips, then we'll be able to provide this service. And the lower floors always had way more money than they needed for the coffee. And the higher you got up, it got to the point where there was no money in the tip jar at all. They just took it.
Yeah.
And that was emblematic of the people who gravitate towards those positions of power. And they couldn't do that if we did not somehow give them our fealty to do it. To say, well, you know, it's become, I was raised to want to be that.
Yeah.
To be the guy on the top floor. and without really me understanding what that meant. And it wasn't until in my mid-20s I started saying, what are we doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? What am I contributing with my life to my society, to my environment? Am I taking more than I'm doing, or am I growing as a human, growing the human endeavor, or am I just sucking off of the planet that I live on?
I have to say, I that seems to be a bigger problem today than it ever has been. I mean, again, there's balance, right? I mean, and there's all those people like, oh, these kids these days, nobody wants to work, and that's why there's, everywhere's hiring and nobody's got whatever. So I mean, I think it's not that simple. Yeah. But there's also a ton of people. Everybody wants to be on that top floor. Everybody thinks they deserve to be on that top floor, and everybody thinks that's where they will be happy finally, is once they are on that top floor. And no one thinks about, well, what's going on the other floors, and could that be not just okay, but where I would actually be happiest? I really think that's, and maybe that's, like when you talk about like lifestyles rich and famous, I think Instagram influencer, everybody wants to be the Instagram influencer with the giant mansion. I'm
23 years old and I make $20 million a month. Like
doing nothing, really.
Doing nothing, right.
And who cares if it's just making stupid videos that literally contribute nothing.
It's another iteration of that idea. I can't remember the phrase. I wrote it down earlier. It's when Mark French jumped at me for saying, said, write it down right now. But it's the idea of being raised. I was raised, I think of my own childhood, I was raised to play a game that I couldn't win. But the ethos of the way I played the game said that I couldn't quit or I'm a loser.
Right.
And I feel like so much of our society has put us like on a carrot on a stick track to get the thing we could never have. And that's how we are moved around almost as livestock to move resources around, to extract resources and move resources into the hands of the few.
We belittle the guy who's happy to be a postal worker for 40 years.
Yeah.
And we belittle the guy who's happy to run the dump truck. And we belittle the lady who's happy to work at Denny's until she's 60. Like, when are you going to get a real job? Or aren't you going to do something with your life? Like, yeah. And we are brainwashed to do that to each other.
Yes.
That's public relations. I'm sorry, that's the correct term.
But you should
public
be
relations.
Striving to do better.
More, better all the time.
Yeah.
So you wanted to play devil's advocate about something earlier. Is it already gone?
No, it's not gone.
Okay.
You said, isn't it great that we all have this shared trauma?
I didn't say it exactly that way.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great that I appreciate? Isn't it great that we all have this shared trauma now, because it's going to enable us to open up more conversations about trauma, because this is one that most people can acknowledge they've had.
I didn't say it was great.
No, I know.
I said this is.
They're going to pull
that clip. It feels like there
out.
is an opportunity.
Yep. They're going to pull that clip out someday, and they'll be like,
"There's an opportunity."
He likes it.
Yep.
However, devil's advocate, the same people who aren't interested in talking about trauma are the same people who were not traumatized by the last 2 years.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I agree.
I know a ton of people in a particularly reddish, conservative-ish demographic who did not find the last 2 years to be traumatizing, because they were not living the same way as my bluish friends were living.
Okay.
Like in nuclear shelters of their homes alone for the good of humanity.
I can very much say that's yes.
Yeah.
I think, and it not necessarily.
So
like
the people
the
who are
harsh
already into talking about trauma will have another thing to talk about trauma. In general, bluish people are more open to mental health stuff, and reddish people are mostly not into mental health stuff.
That is maybe not true.
Okay. I don't know if I agree with that either.
Yeah, I think that's a stereotype.
Yeah.
I do think it's a stereotype.
But as a clinician,
yes, you have more data than I do.
I often, and because, well, I think I held that belief. And I think I even still sometimes will see someone and it's always, when you work in mind, body, spirit stuff, and integrative therapies, and it's always like, what level do I start this person at?
Right.
When they come in, do I just like do some basic craniosacral and, you know, or do we just dive right in there and like, you know, really go nuts?
Have they ever thought about their own thoughts?
Right. And I've definitely realized that you cannot tell outwardly.
Where somebody's
you know?
at.
Yeah. You know, I've had some of the most conservative seeming, you know, older white male guys, military guys, or, you know, and they're the most open about that. You know, I mean, they're the ones coming in and I'm like, oh, okay, we'll start real slow. And they're like, I really think my heart chakra is blocked and I need, you know, to ground better. And I'm hoping that you have some insight into how I can, you know, work through this, you know, like, and I'm like, oh, excellent then. Well, cool. You know, but like, and here I am thinking that this guy's never going to open up to this. So I don't know that that's true. I definitely know they're the ones talking about it more. They're the ones more open and discussing it.
The bluish people.
Yeah. But that's not necessarily meaning that they are the ones more open to it. Especially.
I love hearing that change.
Yeah. I think actually there's a lot of people more open to it these days. Like I said, the big problem I perceive being they don't see it as them necessarily. But I do agree that, oh, this is great that we all have this shared trauma, because that is something that I can approach with them as like, yeah, this is a traumatic event that you lived through.
Yeah.
And they'll go, oh, and then, but I'm still not traumatized from it. And like, okay. And then you can start there and work forward with that until they go, you know, get smacked in the face and go, oh my God, that was totally a trauma. And I have been living like that. But it's, you know, sometimes it's not that dramatic, but it's very, yeah, I think that's the stereotype. I don't think it's true.
We talked about
happy to stand corrected on that one.
Season 2, we talked a lot about trauma, of like us becoming trauma aware, of me trying to understand how what happened, and understanding that the people who were pushing us out as they thought we were a danger and they were trying to push us out of a scene. Me not trying to understand how that happened. How did these people perceive me as an enemy? How did I suddenly become perceived as an enemy? And then it became like, well, I've been trying to have rational conversations with people exhibiting trauma behavior. So I've been trying to be rational in a way where the folks were not able to have a rational conversation, which made me look other. And it's really easy to punish the other.
Yes. Very
who's
much
not
so.
like you. And so season 3, we want to spend more time on what can be done. Like I feel more trauma aware. I feel like I understand when I go into a state where I'm just like, fuck that guy or fuck that thing. And I'm like, what is that?
Why am I doing that?
Why am I doing that? And I'm
That's not a
better at
healthy
asking
response.
that question.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is fuck that guy and fuck that thing, you know, like, but I find myself putting people into categories, putting people into stereotypes, and then assigning their thoughts about me to them who I've never talked to.
Right.
Just projecting that onto them.
Projecting.
Yeah.
So this season, we want to talk more about people in your field and people who are outside of your field that are doing your work. The work of trying to get us integrated again.
With
the mind and the
ourselves.
body integrated again. Because I think there's this desire, especially from a lot of friends of mine who are considered progressive or philosophers, or they want to save the world, right? How do we save the world? And I'm like, it's got to start here. You've got to get integrated first and decentralize the revolution, taking care of ourselves first, taking care of the people in our community first. And we're looking for ways to do that. Options for people to explore.
We had a lot of feedback in season 2 of people being like, yes, but what do we do about it?
Yeah, it's all
For
terrible,
sure.
but then what?
But I love sitting around and philosophizing and theorizing and junk, but I need action.
Yeah.
Yes.
What can we do?
Which I am living in a very secure and happy life. And so I don't feel as though I need an action item at the end of the show, because to me, I'm living in a place of security and happiness. And we have to remind ourselves, like, a lot of people are not living in a place of security and happiness. And so it's really healthy to end the show with a conversation about, like, what are some actionable things that we can do to feel as though we're not just left in this philosophical muck on top of everything else.
I've been trying to focus on how we can get back together after being split apart. We all got atomized. And like, how do we come back together, especially when so many people are even traumatized by the idea of getting together with people?
Yeah.
Physically.
Yeah. So, you know, I completely agree as far as the start with you. You know, I mean, I said earlier, I learned very early on the greatest gift I could give my clients was a well-tuned therapist, you know, and like really like create, like make myself into a very safe and secure container that people then could feel like open to letting themselves go and open up.
Right.
With. You know, behavior change is probably one of the hardest things there is, right? You know, to like, I can tell you all the things that you probably know. Like there's breathing exercises that you can do to help, you know, regulate your nervous system. There's a lot of somatic practices, and somatic regulation strategies, somatic meaning touch and physical and body. You know, but and of course meditation and, you know, eating healthier and all these other things. But then it's like, shit, that's a lot of things. I don't know, like if I can do that today, let alone every day and all this. And I'm actually running a 12-week program starting this next week, specifically for brain and mood health.
Awesome.
To help people with changing.
Is this a physical location where you're doing this, or is this an online thing people can join?
People can join.
Sweet.
We'll meet once a week for the next 12 weeks. And essentially it's about changing identity and, you know, taking each week to focus on, you know, the three things, right? You know, it's the mind, body, spirit aspect of behavior change and saying, okay, so this is the first thing that you should be changing, you know, not should be, but might want to invite, you know, yourself to change, to become the person who lives the life that you want to be living. And, you know, looking at underlying beliefs around why you would ever not do that, you know, and then the practicalities of how you can fit that into your already very full life.
That's awesome.
You know, and it's really, it's something that's very necessary. I will say it's not a program I designed. It's a program that I am certified to facilitate. This was actually designed by someone who's, you know, way more specialized in this than I am. His name's Dr. Dan Engel. He is a integrative psychiatrist, and he does a lot with like psychedelic work and things like that. And he's written quite a few books, one of which, Freedom from Meds, is a really, really great book. But that's...
And so people can find you on Facebook, I know.
People can find me on Facebook.
But then, like, how should they reach out to you about this class and or potentially other services in the future? Because I know for personal experience that you do Zoom therapy.
Yes, I do. I do
several kinds.
Yes. And I never thought I would do that. I was very much against it. But then, of course, COVID forced us all to explore distance therapies a little bit more. And then I started realizing, honestly, it's just as effective. It's really, it's about establishing that safe container and then navigating properly so that, you know, you always do your own healing, right? In any form, doesn't matter what we're doing. But as far as reaching me, I can give you guys a link that people can follow to be able to find me. I am on social media at Holistic Bodywork Therapy. I'm on Instagram and Facebook.
We'll put the links in the YouTube and the Facebook chat so people can check it out.
Yes. And if you want to learn any more about that program, just DM me at this point on Facebook, because it is starting this next week, and I can get you any information or get you signed up.
Awesome. So Stonefruit Media
Yep. Do you
and
have questions
Darren
from the
Anthony,
folks?
they've been
Yep.
going back and forth.
Okay.
It's been super awesome. I'm just going to scroll back up to the top
Okay.
of what they were talking about most recently, and we'll just go through these. So we were talking about benign racism versus malignant racism, or accidental racism versus intentional racism. And we talked about how we were talking about how there's always a reason somebody does things. And in general, people are trying to do stuff for some kind of good, you know,
Yes.
or like they believe that what they're doing is fine.
You're always the good guy in your own
This
story.
belief system.
Yeah.
I think personally, from what I've understood about psychology and what's going on the planet, is that there are a few people on the planet, maybe like a few thousand people, say, on the planet, who are sociopathic, psychopathic people who are under no illusion that what they're doing is for the good of humanity. They know that what they're doing is for their good and the benefit of their people, and they don't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are some people that are truly like that, and many of them are in positions of obscene power in the structures on the financial structures specifically on the planet.
And they're shaping those.
Yeah.
They're shaping those pathways.
So things like the World Economic Forum and BlackRock and Blackstone and the World Banks, these organizations manage finances, and in managing the global finances, they are managing governments. And whereas in many places on the way up, there are people who really truly believe they're probably doing the right thing. At the very top of these pyramids, I believe, are people who literally do not give a shit and also know that what they're doing is hurting lots of people, but they don't care because they're so detached from the machine of empathetic human society.
It's still really the same psychology, though. I mean, they are doing the right thing, and the right thing is what's best for them.
Right. And because they're detached from empathy.
Right.
With society and empathy.
It's a godlike position. And I think a lot of people, this is the problem that I feel like we're having, is a lot of people can't imagine that degree of callousness and meanness.
And lack of empathy.
And so they can't imagine it's happening because they're so kind and loving and wouldn't imagine ever hurting anybody or anything. They cannot possibly imagine that there are people like that.
And so they keep believing that whatever's happening to them in
Must
the world
be good people trying to do it.
must be somebody who means well.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of the things that happen to us as citizens are orchestrated out of no desire to take care of the citizens, but rather to keep the machine of the planet going for the benefit of the people who are at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why the Occupy thing was so powerful when it happened, because somebody had articulated the 99 and 1%. Instead of the left and the right, or the red and the blue, or the us and the them, the blacks or the whites, they were like, this has nothing to do with any of that. This has to do with a small percentage of people who are manipulating the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if we're going to integrate our mind, body, spirit, that's a metaphor for the larger world that we're living in. I mean, we do it by doing it to ourselves, of integrating with ourselves. I think it's also important to understand the problem before you start trying to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And which response we give to which people. Like
And
we were
sometimes
talking
I don't
about.
want to do the work because that would mean facing how bad the problem is or how far I've let something go that I have to work on.
Somebody that does something
Absolutely.
accidentally
Or
racist
that
needs to be treated differently than someone who does something intentionally racist.
Yes.
And that's tiring.
And I think also, the big thing being, I could have done something a long time ago and I didn't, and really all of this was my fault.
Right.
You know,
because I didn't.
I would
make
have
it-
to stop blaming somebody else for my problems, and that's
Accept
too painful.
responsibility.
That's
Yeah.
too painful.
And it would mean that I, quote unquote, wasted all that time.
But it
And so
doesn't mean that.
But that's what it feels like.
That's what
you
it
know?
feels like. But I'm just saying, like, if you're at that point, or if you're around somebody that, like, that's at that point, being practical and action oriented, it doesn't mean that. That's what it feels like, but it doesn't mean that.
It actually means you're open to you're going to be having a way better life from now on.
Yep.
Rather than just staying in this same kind of life, so you never have to think about how it was bad before.
I'm guilty of that. I mean, a lot of my philosophy, a lot of my poetry, a lot of my comedy, the stuff that I did was all about trying to find the bad guy so we could come together and
Fight against the bad guy.
And it's only in the last few years that I've just been so exhausted by trying to accomplish such a task that I've started just dealing with my own shit.
Yeah.
So
and realizing,
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. They're realizing that there is no bad guy. The only bad guy is fear. You know, we have two options.
It's how we react.
Yeah, two options: fear and love. And I mean, that can sound super like, oh, hippie shit.
But in
whatever.
every single
Maybe I
moment,
am,
that's
totally.
all there is. And
I get-
every
That's what it really
moment, that's
comes
all
down
there
to,
is.
yeah.
It's true. And really, when you talk about people who just don't give a shit, I mean, I think they do. I think they're terrified. And so they amass as much power as they can to become as godlike as they can, because then they have more control and less to be afraid of.
It's a control thing, yeah.
I feel as though psychopathy and sociopathy are grounded in fear.
Yes. I mean, you know, of course there are some people who have literally no emotion.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing. And I mean, who the hell knows? I mean,
Right.
Is it the devil? Is it like, you know, just something broken
Some
in their
chemical
brain, some
imbalance,
weird thing, like
yeah.
Right.
who knows? But, that's, you know, usually it's much more about fear. And really, even with people like that, it's often about fear, you know, because they just don't have the capacity for empathy. So it's a little easier for them to allow their fear to carry them farther. Really, you know, we do a lot out of fear on a daily basis and call it love.
Yeah.
You know, we say we love our kids so much that we, you know, force them into roles that don't fit them because
For their own good.
for their own good. But really, we're just afraid what will happen if they are left to their own devices, or if they do something that they really love instead of becoming a lawyer or something, you know, if they become an artist. And so we make choices for them out of love, but really it's out of fear. You know, we do a lot of controlling things. And that's why this mindfulness aspect is so great, to just sit down and think and talk about what we're doing, to ask, is my nervous system regulated? Do I feel safe? Are these decisions that I'm making out of love actually from a place of fear? You know, and because the only difference between the most awesome person, you know, who's just Mother Teresa, selfless, loving, giving, and that guy at the top of the tower that doesn't give a shit is
Complete orientation in love versus complete orientation in fear.
yeah. And really,
Star Wars had it right all along.
yeah. Star Wars is incredibly insightful, actually.
The original 3, mostly.
I don't know, man. Have you watched the Clone Wars, the animated series?
I've heard a lot of shit about the Clone Wars. Actually, I have heard that, and people are really getting a lot from the Mandalorian too. So
Yes.
we're just gonna
Mandalorian
not
was wonderful,
talk about
and the Book of Boba Fett
We're just
totally
not gonna
brought
talk
me
about
back
like
to yeah,
Yeah.
loved it.
the Phantom Menace. Those 3.
Yeah, those ones didn't
Those were
happen.
like it was like
Actually,
here's
those
Star-
ones were better than the other newest 3.
Oh really?
Yeah, I didn't love I think they're writing those out completely and gonna like redo the story, like alternate
That's crazy.
history wise.
I know so many people who are obsessed with Kylo Ren and
Right.
the Chica, whatever her name was,
Ray.
and their story.
I'm not, but okay.
I preferred as far as sequels. Well, you know, it's sort of a time immemorial thing. It's the Edward Scissorhands. It's the Harley Joker. It's the Beauty and the Beast. You know, like this is a primal. For some reason, this is a primal love story that we keep retelling over and over again as the Beauty and the Beast. But I really liked the sequels. The what's his name? Timothy Zahn. Star Wars trilogy. He wrote a 3-book series about what happened after the Return of the Jedi and their choice. And they're like, really, what actually happened? You know, like Han and Leia.
Like what actually happened.
Han and Leia get married and they have twins, and then this new power comes up, and they're dealing with trying to create a society out of having crashed the one that was running the universe, even though they were the bad guys.
Right.
That still means we're dealing with a crashed society. You know. So we have.
So something has to come out of that.
Yes, and how do we make sure that the thing that rises from the ashes is healthier?
Right.
They're very, very good books.
I know.
I really wanted them to make those into a movie.
I could sit here and talk about Star Wars and the philosophy behind it for the next 2 hours.
We could
also.
make another show. We'll make another
Just
show.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, really, like I love like the entire, and like, you know, the balance aspect and, you know, how Luke screwed everything up by, you know, attempting to rebuild the old Republic and the Jedi
Acting
Order
out of striving.
instead of really seeing the balance that could be there between the two sides. And
I meditate a lot on Yoda's thing that we thought was dumb when we were children, but now it's like do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah.
There is only the present moment and what you are or are not doing. You are not trying to read more books. You either are choosing to read a book right now or not choosing to read a book right now.
it's in your power.
And you, instead of feeling exhausted by trying all the time, just do
do it.
or don't do it. Do it or don't do it. Try does not exist.
And if it's not working, asking why.
yeah,
and
try
fixing
only
that.
exists in your mind.
Quitting an addiction was like that. Quitting cigarettes was like that. All my time was spent around thinking about when I was going to quit. You know, it was
Instead
always
of
like
not
you know what,
smoking.
I'm just gonna have this cigarette. This will probably be my last one because I'm really ready to quit. And now that I'm satisfied with this nicotine, I can easily see myself quitting cigarettes. And it doesn't do anything for me at all. And then, you know, so I can totally do this. And then an hour later, it's like, after this cigarette.
So Stone Fruit Media recommends Joel Bakken's book, The Corporation, and especially the documentary based on it. It uses the DSM to speak about how these people in positions of obscene power often have psychopathic tendencies. Therefore, our entire economic, political, and geopolitical structures are created, framed, and sustained by psychopaths. And when you get to the top of the pyramid of elite atrocities, you get people like Epstein. You get into things even beyond psychopathy. Are we witnessing a kind of flip? And we really only have we can go overboard a little bit, but at some point we'll have to have lunch, friends. So Stone for Media asks, are we witnessing a kind of flip? Growing contingent of anti-war Republicans faced with blue MAGA, so blue no matter who, quote unquote shit libs dying to censor and excoriate people. Excoriate. Yeah. So it's like, what is going on? Because we're having like a bunch of Republicans that were really happy Trump wasn't taking us to war. And he was like the first president that didn't start a war in a really long time. Right. And then we've got a bunch of blue people on the other side who are suddenly like locking down, getting super conservative, getting really close-minded, getting really like pushing people away rather than being the party that brings everybody together.
The Big Ten thing
super
sort of
weird.
blew away.
Yeah. Darren Anthony, so interesting. You're talking about the top of the pyramid, but these people are controlled by the voices in their head, their ego, and being ego-driven always ends in tears, which you kind of brought that to the front, that you're like, even in this, we must have compassion.
Yes.
Even when speaking about psychopaths.
Yeah.
And I do think I still had a little bit of the tiny like little Christian in the back of my head that was like, but some people really are just bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Shush, child.
Well, I think it's also this idea of the prescribed. I think the bad guy is prescribed to disempower people. There's a prescription to like fight you have to go fight the bad guy, which creates the specter of something big that has to be fought versus building a parallel institution. So he's saying like our entire systems are built on psychopaths. So it's like, well, we can do something else. We can build, this is the thing that I've been obsessing about for the last 3 years. We can build parallel institutions to media, to school, to like we can educate ourselves now. We don't have to have the institution educate us and go into debt for 30 years to do it. We can educate ourselves. We can be healing ourselves. We can find ways to manage our communities and build new institutions rather than taking on this thing of fighting the Hydra that has no head to chop off.
Yeah.
And that's been a slow transition for me because I still just want to go chop off a head.
Yeah, Stone Fruit Media says, I have no compassion for the Sackler family. Hang them from the lampposts.
Okay.
And it's tough.
I know that feeling.
Yes.
Because it feels good.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could just stop the bad guy?
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah. No. This is why I think the ripple, it's like the brainwashing trickled down from the top. And I think the healing has to bubble up from individual healing.
And also, I think when we say compassion, I don't think we need compassion as much as that equanimity, right? To say, like, they're not just bad.
Yeah.
They are the way they are for a reason. It's not okay. I'm not going to let it stay that way and not try to do something about it.
It doesn't mean you.
But it's not like they were just like
better.
touched by evil and are, this like sort of magical bad thing.
I like this breakdown. Equanimity is acknowledgement of the present moment reality. What's really happening? Like what is actually this is nonviolent communication.
Yes.
What is actually happening right now? Followed by, in a separate acknowledgement, acceptance and opening up to the moment and how we're relating to it.
Yes.
So acknowledging what's going on is different than how I feel about what's going on. And then when we acknowledge how we're relating to what's going on, it enables wise actions for future moments.
Love it.
More of that.
Yes.
Do you guys have any final things? Obviously we could just go on forever.
We could just keep
do
talking
this again sometime.
But,
someday when we have an audience that's supporting the work, we'll be able to do multiple shows a week. At this point, Dark and I can't do real life and also edit and pre-produce more than one show a week. But if you guys would like to support Post-Orthodoxy, you can go to postorthodoxy.com and sign up for as little as $5 a month to help us get to the point where we can produce more shows a week and we can start paying our guests and paying some teenager to produce the shows for me after the fact and some other teenager to do my social media, and it'll be amazing.
So nag your friends. Tell your friends, tell everybody about it, get everybody listening.
There might be people that think that what we're doing is worth throwing money at, even if they don't want to take the time to tune in.
Somebody on Twitch said, do we want to be famous? We can buy followers.
Oh, yes, that's totally a thing.
YouTube, not pink axe.
That's funny.
All right.
That's a funny
Apropos,
final comment.
Stone Fruit Media, parallel systems. You said parallel institutions.
Right.
Buckminster Fuller said it long ago. Build new systems. Don't try to reform the existing ones.
You can't fix the problem, a broken system, by the mechanism of the broken system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Broken systems will collapse under the weight of their own filth and unsustainability. That's a nice belief.
So we have one more question for you that we're going to ask off air. It's
Secret
a part
question.
of a documentary that we're doing where we're asking everybody the same question.
Okay.
And we're going to segue it all together into a little documentary. So we'll ask that off the air. So we'll have you stick around for a minute. But thank you for coming down and sharing the work that you're doing with us on the show so other people know that there are things like this happening in the world.
And you guys go find Christine Trafford on Facebook, Holistic Bodywork. Say it again.
Holistic Bodywork Therapy.
Thank you for visiting our Outpost in the Borderlands.
Bye, guys.
Post-Orthodoxy is a project of Sevier Studios. We host ongoing, interactive conversations centered around cognitive liberty, and you can join in by catching one of our live streams on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. You can also catch each conversation after the fact as a podcast by searching for Post-Orthodoxy wherever podcasts are found. If you take value from the work we are doing and the community we're building together, you can support the Outpost in the Borderlands for as little as $5 a month on our website, Better Time. That's betterti.me. Visit the Sevier Studios page and subscribe. You can also support the Outpost by following and connecting with us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and or Substack. Our Post-Orthodoxy theme music was composed by Frank Pascal, and a special thanks goes to our voice actors, Amelia, Colin, Zbo, Rosie, Gabo, Vicky, Mokai, and Tony.
Thanks for playing.
What's outside your reality bubble? I think I dribbled a bit.